Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursaleen wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin wa ashabihi al-muntajabin wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsan ila qiyam yawmiddin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I wanted to talk about the aspect of wilaya, very sort of simplistically and briefly. On the back of this hadith that we have from the Imams, that Islam has been built on 5 pillars: prayers, fasting, Hajj, Zakat, and Wilaya. And had it not been for Wilaya, the others would not have been accepted. Now, this is talking about Wilaya as an essential facet of faith. What Wilaya means is to internally connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now you can imagine that if we do not have the wilaya of Allah, then prayers and fasts merely become bodily actions. They have no substance or essence or soul to them. So if wilaya, that inner connection with God, is established, then the rest of the actions or identity giving practices for a Muslim will become productive. Now, having said that, what we find is that we cannot connect with Allah. It's very, very difficult. For some, it might be very, very easy to directly connect with God. Others are just not accustomed of thinking of God or feeling God, because we are, after all, material entities. God is a non-material being. He is not to be found in a place. So it becomes a bit of a task trying to talk with God and finding God. And even when we talk with God, it seems unreal. We are talking in thin air. In order to overcome this particular problem, we are told to adhere to the wilaya of the Blessed Prophet and the saintly figures. And none are more saintly than the progeny of the Blessed Prophet. Now, why is this so crucial? We cannot relate to God, but we can relate to one who is like us. And by relating to them, our own connection with the beauty to which they are connected. So when we are told in Islam to love the Blessed Prophet and his family, it is only there for us to lose ourselves in them. And losing ourselves in them means losing ourselves in their object of love. So inevitably, we end up with God through a very substantive manner. This was a prelude for what I want to say now. No matter how much we explain to ourselves that sorrows of this life will pass and we will go on to a new phase of life, there is some meaning to them, we still find that it does not convince us that the sorrows are there for a reason. We have enemies, we have frustrations, we have flaws within us. We constantly repeat the same wrongs that we have been doing. We end up wasting a lot of time, and on top of that, we lose confidence in our own selves. This is what real life is all about. Now, if we were to look up to someone, and if they can display all these frailties that we have, and they can work through it, then that shows us immediately that, as opposed to shunning things away within our minds or being too scared to look at them, and as opposed to claiming ourselves as failures, maybe we can start acknowledging what we are, how we are wrong, and how we can work through it. Because the first part to resolve the problem is to acknowledge that there is a problem, and that this problem is not a real problem. I am making it bigger than what it is. Once we can arrive at that, then we will find that we can take positive steps in order to rectify the problem. How is that connected with wilaya? For example, If we look at the life of the Blessed Prophet, we find that he did get frustrated. He did not know what was going to happen. He did spend sleepless nights at times worrying about what will happen tomorrow. He did feel anxiety and at times fear. He did fear what the people were going to say about him and talk about him, and we can see that in his lifetime. We see the Quran talking about this. So the Prophet felt those things. But what the Prophet did was, he did not hide them away. He did not make excuses for them. He felt defeated. He felt anxiety. He felt unsurety. But at that point, he took it straight to God. And he said to Allah, this is what I am feeling, and I need you to assist me through this. And through his frailty, he built a strong bond with God. So he uses it very meaningfully. Same with Imam Zainul Abidin. If you read his daily du'as that are to be recited on the days of the week, in one of the du'as he says, "O Allah, I seek forgiveness from you for the ill that I have thought of others, or I have said to others, or the wrong that I've done to others, and the wrongs that I have done previously and I might have forgotten, but you remember them." So he acknowledges himself that, look, I may have spoken ill of people. I may have thought in a wrong way about people. I may have offended people. So now what? Now he has acknowledged. And then he says to Allah, but I need your help here. Allow me to put right the wrongs that I have done slowly through you. And then he says, but there might be certain wrongs that I cannot rectify because of possibly the embarrassment of it, or that that person may no longer be available. They may have died. He says, oh Allah, in this instance, therefore, you help me by compensating on my behalf. Make them pleased with me by you showering your mercy upon them and heavily bestowing upon them so that they may find it in their souls to let it go. Now, obviously, he is talking about both those who have passed on to the next stage of life and those that are inaccessible in this life because of lack of contact or because of the embarrassment of acknowledging that situation. But look at the truthful way in which he opens up to God and displays his humanness and human frailty. So when we adhere to Wilaya, we fall in love with the being of the Prophet, of the saintly Imams. What we begin to do is we begin to emulate them. We begin to lose ourselves in them. But loss of the self within them is not that we conjure up a fanciful image of the Prophet and the Imams and we lose ourselves. No, I'm talking about substantive form of losing by seeing what they were, their character, their conduct, their attitude, their relationship with the people, their relationship with God. Now look at Imam Hussein, how brutally honest he is in his dua Arafah. He says, oh Allah, you see what they are doing to me. I complain to you about their ill treatment of me. So here now, he does not find it below his dignity to complain to God of the people that are wronging him. He is not asking God to take revenge and to destroy them. He is just feeling bitter, he is hurt inside, he is paining, and he shares it openly with his God. What that does for him is it empties his heart. His heart is no longer preoccupied with that situation. But if we go to a statement of Imam Ali, Salamullah alayhi, in Dua Kumail, I know many people will say, I find this statement strange, but we read it nonetheless, that, oh God, deceive those who strive to deceive me. But the Quran says it as well. They plan and God plans, and God is the best of planners. They seek to deceive, and God deceives them instead. What I'm trying to say here is that he is being brutally honest with God. He's not hiding away. He does not say, this is below my dignity. He says, I feel this way. I feel strongly about it, and I'm going to share it with my God. That those people who are planning against me, you plan against them, oh God. What that does is that this aspect of wilaya, it allows us to open up to God through our role models, because they opened up to God in such a meaningful way by sharing not only their own inadequacies in the relationship with God, but by also sharing their humanness and the frailty that it brings in terms of their worldly concerns and interpersonal problems that they were having. If we can do that, we will find that there is legitimacy for us to complain, for us to open up, for us to acknowledge ourselves, and for us to place it upon the shoulders of God. Of course, God does not have shoulders, but place it upon God. We will become freer people inside. We will not be preoccupied with all the burdens that we carry upon our shoulders, and they are hoarded within our chests. One of the things that the Imams were constantly demonstrating was that the heart has to be clean, because that is the abode of God. It cannot be tarnished with hatred, with ill feelings towards others, with rancor and misgivings. The best way to free the heart again is to talk to God about it. Now, one of the problems that we encounter frequently is repetition of mistakes. We constantly repeat mistakes, and then we find a sense of defeat within ourselves, and we lose hope within ourselves. Now, Imam Zainul Abidin, he approaches with this very problem, and he says to Allah, I have come before you on so many occasions, seeking forgiveness, only to find myself repeating the same thing again. Now I'm at a state where I have to acknowledge to you, through humility and somewhat of embarrassment, that even as I seek forgiveness from you at this point, I know I will revert to my former habit. Now, that sin could be doing something wrong, not upholding a promise, not living up to expectation, not upholding our commitment. When that becomes a habit, we reinforce it by this sense of feeling defeated within and finding that we are not good enough. But if we can do what the fourth Imam did, to go to God and to say, look, even as I seek a fresh start, I know and you know that there is a huge likelihood that I'm going to revert to it. But here is what I need from you. I need from you to be understanding. I need from you to be helping me, that the next time I stand before you, I'm a little bit less guilty than what I am right now. And that is the positive way in which to interact with God. Because if we are frequently going to God and saying, look, I did not uphold this commitment, I did this thing wrong again, I thought this thought, I said things in haste, I reacted in haste, I was not wise in my interaction or in my response. When we do this frequently enough and we open up to God, it starts lessening, because we have involved God at that very intimate level. So when we start examining the conduct and the character and the inner beings of these beautiful people, we begin to lose ourselves in them by emulating them. Emulating what about them? emulating their relationship with their God. And that is how we can actually resolve a lot of the problem that is within us. Now, I know when we go to the majlis of Imam Hussein, we cry for Imam Hussein because we feel the pain. But a lot of the time, we can only feel the pain because we relate to it. You see, if an alien were to come who does not have a notion of family, children, grief, sorrow, if they don't feel emotions, let us say, or their emotional makeup is not the same as ours, that emotive narration of Imam Hussein might not mean much to them. They will understand the moral, intellectual message of Imam Hussein's whole story. But for us, the moral message is topped by the emotive message because we relate to pain and sorrow. Now, when we cry on Imam Hussein, what we find is we are letting go of our inner burdens. We are using Imam Hussein as a means, not for only loving him, but for loving ourselves and being kind to ourselves and relieving our souls of its burden. That's a beautiful way in which Wilaya can work for us. I know my time is over, so I'm going to stop there. Maybe, inshallah, we can continue with this again in the following discussions.
Thank you, Sheikh. If anyone has any questions, they can use the raise hands function on Zoom or can type it on the chat. Sheikh, I had a question here. With the extreme sorrows, how do you, if one faces extreme sorrows, how do you surrender?
So the first thing is, with that integrity and honesty, to go to Allah and to say to him that, look, I have extreme sorrows and I'm feeling a lot of pain and I can't bear it. And if somebody wants to complain to God in that state, then they should feel free enough to complain to God that, God, why aren't you helping me? The first thing to do is to be our real self, honest self. A lot of the times we feel, I can't complain to God, or I can't ask God, why didn't you assist me? Because that is not right. He's the master, I'm the slave, I'm supposed to do this. But that's not a real relationship with God. A real relationship with God is that He is your God. He is your all. Talk with Him as it is inside there. Once we learn to open up to God and talk with Him with confidence, we will find that that sharing with God in itself is therapeutic. You see, suffering is a state of our mind. It's psychological. Pain and danger are physical. How we interact with them causes suffering. So at that interactional level, if we can involve God, then He can start, or His presence, His acquaintance relating to Him can start working from that inner level of the mind and the heart and the soul. So the first thing is, you see, we have to understand there are no magical cures. You can't wave a wand and cure our problems unless if somebody goes for psychotherapy, hypnotherapy, or brain, let's say, some form of a intervention in the physical brain, then we forget those emotions, then we will not suffer. But otherwise, for most of us, suffering is a means for growth. Growth is only when we allow our real godly self to emerge. So suffering becomes that huge opportunity for us to connect with God in the most authentic manner, with a lot of integrity, and allow God to prevail through that suffering.
Thank you, Sheikh. Hussein, I think you had asked a similar question. I hope that answers your question as well. We had another one. Should we not worship God out of gratitude rather than obligation?
God cannot be worshipped out of obligation. That's not the right God. You can only force your children to study when they are at a tender age and they don't understand that it's good for them. Once the children grow up, they will understand the worth of actualization of their intellectual potential. They will pay tens of thousands of pounds to go and study. They will not be need to, you will not need to force them. They will earn to pay for their education. Same thing is with the devotees and the master. The devotees are forced through threats, incentives of paradise, or cultures and religions and peer pressures. But when the devotee emerges as a human, they understand the relationship with God is the relationship of love. Praying Salah is not a chore or duty. It's a moment with my beloved. I would fly 1,000 miles, cross continents to be with my beloved. I look forward to that moment where I'm cut away from all and alone with the alone or alone with the beloved. Devotion and worship can never be an obligation. It's the affair of the heart. Obligation is for a devotee who is in a childlike state. It's somebody like me. Yeah. And then when you grow up, you want to be with God.
Thank you, Sheikh. We have another question. How do you free your heart of hatred when the person who is wronging you is continuing to wrong you on a daily basis? For example, an abusive parent.
At that point, then, you do need to take some action. You need to put things right and say, look, I do not appreciate this, and be honest. Find that strength, inner strength, through God. And tell the parent that at the most sacred place within me, that is the seat of my consciousness, and the place that is supposed to be kept pure for my God, it has been inhabited by hatred for you. This is not a good state for me to be in, to hate you from the core of my being. I need to love you. Be kinder to me. And of course, also pray to God and acknowledge to God, say, Allah, as unbefitting as this may be, you are watching that this hatred prevails about my heart. And I need you to be by my side as I work through it. As I said, life is difficult and it's not easy. And I can imagine how traumatic that may be, or that must be. Be authentic, truthful, and say it.